with the 2MK team. I'm probably going to check the sound a little bit, but usually it's a problem a little, but not terribly. It depends on what's going on in the matches. I might talk a little louder than usual, but I might also not be talking that much. Unlike most of our stuff, you really don't have to look all that hard. The game is still not super popular in terms of lobbies compared to most, so you'll just be able to search the standard search and you should find the lounge itself. We don't have any restrictions today on connection quality. Please just police yourself, leave if it's terrible. We also don't have any restrictions on the level of skill that is allowed to join, but as always, unless you're interested in learning, helping, or practicing a character you don't normally play, loser stays on is fairly discouraging, because if you come in and beat everyone up, you get to play less. So head on in if you think you're around even with the better players of the lounge, and especially if you've got time to just hang around and hang out with us. You'll always be able to find our information on our Twitter 2_MK_FGC, but today there's not much to note on the Twitter because, hey, the game doesn't really require that much of you in order to find us. Today we have Kansuki Dynasty on her usual Rune Siren account and Amara playing from 100% account, i.e. just mine, for various reasons. So if you're seeing Wallstein once again, do not be surprised. It is the equivalent of 3 rounds first to 2. This is a more or less Atlantic Rim lounge, but as noted, we don't have any restrictions on the connection speed or connection quality that is able to join us. Feel free to hop in and see how the lag is before you decide anything. We will generally accept up to 6 frames because we're beginners and all of the crazy stuff isn't stuff we even need to start trying to deal with yet. We just don't play this game enough for us to really want to call ourselves anything higher than beginners yet, but due to our bots, we're the specific type of beginners that usually knows what's going on, i.e. can know why we're losing, but not necessarily how to do anything about it, or just don't have the reactions. So even if you do manage to come in and more or less steamroll your opponent, you don't really have to hold back that much. Chances are we know what you're doing, just don't have the reflexes or skills to do anything about it just yet. And from there you can make your decision about how much of the really strong stuff you want to use. But you can generally expect some decent defense and decent mix-up defense. Some of us don't tech throws though. And whether or not we actually block overheads is also player dependent. Let's go with that. Every time we play this game, I usually make the same notes. Please remember that backdashes are completely invincible. Please remember that you can't be thrown on the first early frames of your wake up, so you could just block or backdash. That's generally how you go through this game, in fact. Wake up situations are block or backdash, which is precisely why your opponent tends to spend so much time pressuring you when they get you cornered, because you can't do the backdash thing with as much safety anymore. And blocking doesn't allow you to take advantage of the pushback. So, don't get cornered. Aside from that, you can always, of course, let us know in stream chat if there's anything you think we should know about the character that you're playing if you're joining us, or the characters that we're playing if you happen to know them really well. Most likely, if you give long explanations about combos, it's not going to help a lot. No one has time to practice them in lounge and probably didn't practice them before then. But any advice about how to get out of certain situations, avoid certain moves, or moves that can be used to greater effect in situations you see coming up, absolutely appreciated. Let us know. This matchup is always interesting because Elton must always choose between acting preemptively and giving Wallstein a chance to assault through, or waiting and trying to counter whatever is done and having to deal with Wallstein's options for really long buttons. Wallstein, on the other hand, is generally deciding, am I trying to get in or just do damage? Because obviously getting in to do damage helps, but that's not the real reason Wallstein is trying to get in this matchup most of the time. Mostly it's to avoid taking damage. The closer you are to Elton on Wallstein, as long as you aren't basically disadvantaged because you did an unsafe move, the better your situation normally is. She's not terrifying as a character at close range for a character that is able to go into command grabs and set up situations like that. She's also easy to chase when she has ended up close and then wanted to escape. Meaning that, interestingly, getting close to her is, for Wallstein, a defensive tactic. This too happens when she has hit a bunch of buttons, because while the command grab is hard to execute, she's really susceptible to it. Both of them, technically. You have much more trouble reacting to that one, as you just saw, at close range. And the other one, again, while hard to execute, she does have enough breaks in her offense that you have a chance of pulling it off. The mid-range is where they don't want to be fighting. Neither character in this matchup really wants to be at the mid-range. Elton wants to be out here where she can basically shoot forever and try to check any dashes with all sorts of things, really. And Wallstein wants to not be there, so all of that doesn't happen. But because so many of Elton's moves, in terms of punishes, don't work well against the max range of Wallstein's hits, it's relatively easy to just, let me see if I can hit you with the max range of my punch right now. So let's watch that dance of distance and perfect spacing for a while longer, since a lot of patience is going to be involved here. In general, for fighters, the more range you give the normals of a grappler, even if those moves don't turn out to be safe, normally, the stronger the grappler tends to be. Even if only because they get to hit them from outside of the range of other people's buttons. In fact, making those moves slow tends to make the game more balanced overall because then the grappler doesn't get beat up by the other grapplers. But you can't play too defensively in this matchup as Elton because if you play too defensively, eventually Wallstein will throw a rock at you. Fortunately for her, this doesn't actually do that much. She can be so far out that it doesn't matter, for example, but it's really distracting, and it tends to cause a lot more openings for Wallstein to do other things. This is another one of those matches where, when on offense, Elton wants to move to a particular space and then be unpredictable. So far, working well. Elton doesn't have a lot of great defenses against Enkidu, but Enkidu doesn't have a lot of really good offense options either. Phasing through things, moving extremely fast. Even armored moves don't really help as much. The problem with this is that it makes Elton sort of play offense. Not true offense, but enough to, every time she lands a hit, she has to move forward rather than backward. Well, any solid hit anyway. Because if she doesn't, she'll almost always end up at the spacing that favors Enkidu more. Meaning, you get a constant moment of, okay, I've landed a hit, now I have to move to a spot that makes you guess what is happening next. She can't calmly play defense once she has landed things because she's almost always at the spot where Enkidu will get something, and that something is not always punishable.
お仕置きの時間です。ファーストクローズディバイドエージライト戦闘やりますかやりますか爪が潰れなさい戦闘再開これ以上寝てろセカンドクローズディバイド来い
Another reasonable way to look at this is just assuming every time she has gotten a good hit, she's either anti-air or just do her longer range version of the same move, her uppercut, let's say, just for the sake of putting something out there. This isn't as useful on defense, interestingly, making it look as if there's a lot of Hail Marys happening in the match, when she is at least on enough offense for it to happen. Fortunately for her, the way that move interacts with most other moves means that she does often get to do stuff after it to reposition herself in a positive way.
A new sacrifice comes to you.
And that brings us probably back to the Aurier mirror match. We see this a lot, and there's not always much to say about it. It mostly depends on the mood of the players that day, so let's watch and see what moods they're in.
定めに従い、光の鉄槌を。ファーストクローズ、ディバイド。ディバインスラゼル。
It looks like our Aurier players are in the mood for playing footsies, which means that this is basically going to come down to whoever gets frustrated first at the other person's options on wake-up. Why is that the thing that's going to be deciding here? Primarily because obviously the characters are equal in footsies and the two players have very similar flows and mindsets relative to it. They're good at maneuvering each other if they need to, but you can never specifically say beforehand who has the correct choice in a position. The important thing then is to get knockdowns to actually allow for pressure and get that pressure timed right.
Second close, divide. ここから 立てますか？手加減はしたので致命傷には至っていないはずですが、あなたには犠牲になってもらいます。
ファーストクローズディバイド。
刺した。耐えてみせる。足元がここです。ダイナミック&ファスト。落ち回る。断罪。ディバインスラスト。ウイルス。建設戦艦。重さ。ここです。行きます。そこです。エバージョン。ディバインスラスト。行きます。そこです。ここから行きます。ジャリー。耐えてみせる。エバージョン。建設シック&ファスト。行きます。やりますね。いなくって重さ。ここです。ここです。落ちなさい。行きます。わかる。エバージョン。落ちなさい。重さ。建設シック&ファスト。行きました。セークリットアロー。来ました。落ちなさい。エバージョン。落ちなさい。はい。見切れますか？立ちなさい。まだ終わってはいません。したことが。
セカンドクローズディバイド。
やれ。あいつも振り抜く。行きます。先生。行きます。そこです。見切れます。耐えてみせる。耐えてみせる。遅いです。耐えてみせる。エバージョン。落ちなさい。はい。まだまだ。セイクリットアロー。ここです。ダンシックアン見えます。セイクリットファイヤー。エバージョン。落ちなさい。建設戦艦。やります。ここです。ダンシックアンドファスト。やりますね。リバインスラック。リバインで重さ。遅いです。重さ。ここです。耐えてみせる。エバージョン。立ちなさい。まだ終わってはいません。次はこう。
This match in particular carries on well from our note from yesterday's Street Fighter. Lots of scrambles. They happen mostly because the two players are usually going into the air at similar times, and since neither one is completely clear of the angle of attack or intent of the other, combined with the fact that once you've knocked your opponent out of the air, you don't necessarily know what their recovery time is unless you've played the game a lot. You don't know whether or not to press your advantage, if you even have one. Add to that the possibility for invincible backdashes just resolving the whole thing on the opposing side, and you have a lot more trouble dealing with these things, and therefore the scrambles don't usually lead to as devastating effects. But all that means in the end is that there tend to be more of them, simply because the match goes on longer despite the number of scrambles that are happening.
この力で終わらせてやる。
これも定めなのかな。
ファーストクローズディバイド。一層二層そら飲まれろ。一層二層耐えてみせる。
Now we have the internal complexity that is, will Hyde stop attacking now or not? One of this character's great strengths, and one that has been sort of getting stronger and stronger within the same Shoto style archetype is that they've often been given a lot more options in whether or not their strings or just attack movements are over. This usually gives you just enough time as the Hyde player, attacker, Shoto to confuse the opponent enough for you to get away after deciding I should probably not finish this string. The opponent then can take that moment to try to counterattack, and that can be a big problem for you, but so is finishing the string with an unsafe move. This is hard to explain, you just have to watch it in practice. The better a Hyde player is, normally the more time you'll spend wondering, okay, what is coming after that thing that I'm about to perfectly block with no problems. You always have to be thinking exactly one step ahead. Did that move just get done to set me up for another move they're about to do? Fortunately, there is one good solution to this, and Sunfear is in position to use it. Meter! Because you don't care what your opponent's moveset is going to be if you have a relatively safe, invincible EX move to push through it with. In fact, you can see the demonstration of how that works out here. As soon as the opponent has enough meter to use this method, Hyde often has to switch more or less straight to full offense, and focus on the fact that the opponent has been pushed into this mindset of wondering, of thinking about, wait, do I get to push out of this one this time? Should I do something? Making, okay, the moment I go ham is when you have enough meter to stop me, or just after that. A decent option for Hyde players at nearly any level, simply because if it's been going well up until that point, and you just want to prevent the opponent from making a big comeback, it's pretty useful. Playing as Hyde yourself for a while without understanding this aspect of the character really makes this game feel kind of weird, but playing against a Hyde that does understand it really helps understand how the flow of the game works and when you should probably challenge something even though it might not be the best idea to do it. It also helps you learn not to flinch, because flinching comes up a lot in this matchup. In particular, this matchup. If either player flinches for too long, the other one will usually find a way to open them up. And things go downhill rapidly from there.
セカンドクローズディバイド
Whereas usually flinching on Oria's side is in movement or blocking for longer than necessary. You know, flinching because, hey, the opponent's attack, I don't know what to do. Flinching on Hyde's side is often hitting a button because Hyde is pretty sure something is going to happen, which doesn't work well when your buttons stick out so far that nearly everyone in the game can punish them, the ones with the shortest buttons of their own. Doing it in a matchup with a character whose options are heavily based on with punishing, at least in terms of their normals, makes it worse. Which is another reason why it makes more sense to sometimes just go all in or back off entirely instead of doing any of that. At least then you can hope that your opponent makes a mistake and that you get to use Hyde's relatively high damage to capitalize on that mistake. From the other side, moving without necessarily attacking, with the expectation that Hyde will stick one of his massively slow and overpowered buttons out in front of him before you can hit, is often a good strategy. The difficulty is usually confirming to get enough damage off of this because you don't really control which button Hyde hits, and therefore the combos you get off of your own depend on how quickly you can react and with what button. Still, as an overall flow through the match, it's probably better simply because you get to learn more doing it, and you tend to take less damage. As demonstrated.
First close, divide. セカンドクローズ、ディバイド。
Wallstein is not generally able to take advantage of the same things that Orie is because of the slower nature of Wallstein's buttons. On the other hand, Wallstein doesn't care what half the things Hyde does anyway, and can just play this match as if it is a normal match, with one defensive difficulty. Specifically that once Hyde has managed to get into the air, it's not necessarily clear what Wallstein should do about it. From the Hyde side, this means that the best thing you can probably do is jump. But this still requires that Wallstein not be ready. There are options, there are very real options. It's just that if you're playing a good enough ground game, probably Wallstein is not focused enough on those options for you to actually get hit every time, and you don't tend to take a massive amount of damage for doing it. You would have to have put nearly no stress on your opponent mentally to get really hurt for jumping every time. Hyde has enough options to check his own air momentum with relatively long buttons at the very tip of them, and so on, to prevent having to deal with these problems. Unfortunately, despite being able to catch Wallstein in long combo situations, it often doesn't actually convert to big damage. Meaning that the Wallstein player more or less ignores you because you're kind of a fly, and will eventually be squashed. Combine that with Hyde needing to get in against one of the characters with the strongest toe in the game, and you have a problem. Key for Wallstein's side is mostly to not get frustrated by being pushed into long combo strings, because they're mostly not actually doing much damage to you. Half the time they're just building up your meter. Fortunately for Hyde, Wallstein doesn't really get a lot out of meter in this matchup. Because of that playstyle, there's not a bunch of things Wallstein can convert out of, except when you do that. But even that is still not terrifying damage, it's more so a problem because Hyde ends up cornering it. This is a general thing to get used to in this game. It takes a lot to not be frustrated from other games where you're thinking, I'm supposed to be able to do something. If something is happening for 10 seconds, I am doing something wrong. No, your opponent's just doing something right, and you should probably relax.
インスレーター。ファーストクローズディバイド。ファーストセカンドだ。引け。食べてみそ。切る。そこだ。引け。そこだ。の。やがれ。よっと。よっと。くらえ。いくぞ。せい。ただだ。強い。せこの。あえてみせる。この。おうや。みそ。まだまだいる。進める。これ。まだだ。切る。ありえねえ。突きあり。進める。切れ。だだ。進める。逃がせ。シャドウ。の。まだまだよ。やせん。そうだ。クレイバー。ありえねえ。突きあり。進める。クレイバー。オービター。風がウィンザラつく。ハイパーセカンドクローリバイド。まだまだよ。皆さん。よっとファースト。オービター。来い。
A good choice there, and demonstrating one of the things that comes up in this matchup when the players are just learning it. Enkidu players want to move to get into range to do certain things. High players don't have to zone to prevent this movement, they just have to be out of the way. The fact that High can counterattack from his out of the way positions, however, definitely causes Enkidu some problems in the long term. This can be as simple as I'm out of the way because I'm standing too far out, or I'm out of the way because I've jumped into the air, but it definitely comes up a lot. Worse yet, for Enkidu players, most of the time, even if they manage to open Hide up, the conversion required to actually do any damage is so difficult that at the low level, it feels pointless enough to not bother. This gives Hide players a massive psychological advantage because they're constantly being able to be chased, and when they do make the mistake of being out of position, or rather blocking incorrectly, Enkidu really doesn't get to do much damage from that. It takes a lot of practice to get there, so blocking is optimal, and that sort of thing with that cross-up helps a lot more. Since you can in fact stop a lot of Hide's moves because Enkidu can actually counter projectiles. It's just that normally when you counter them, the opponent is nowhere near close enough for this to help you. Meaning that building up enough meter to get the correct counter is one of the things Enkidu cares about the most. The second thing being dashing C. 6-6C is such a strong option here that there's nothing that Hide can really do about it that isn't risky. Mainly, this helps because it gives Enkidu a way to dash into the correct spacing to start offense, while making the Hide player think about something else that's supposed to happen. It isn't necessarily that you expect the 6-6C to hit. You just want to try it whenever you think it will be blocked to make your opponent think about it enough that you can then just dash and do what you want with the dash. It also, as you can see, goes over a ton of those. Basically all of them. This game is much more hitbox dependent than property dependent for certain moves, but it's still generally, yeah, you can't hit me with lows here, which means you get to use it from Enkidu's side at much closer ranges, the difficulty being executing it in the space required. But as it goes, dashing C at that space is easier than most other things you might need to do in the matchup. It also tends to hit high enough that if High tries to jump on reaction to it, he will still get clipped at least. And while it doesn't lead to damage from there necessarily, it's not bad. You at least get a lot of knockback, you get a lot of spacing control, and so on. Now we move on to the character where the parry doesn't help, basically at all. The 660 and 660 still do help. In the same spaces actually, more so close than I'm trying to get it entirely. But, as we mentioned before, Outland deals with this by getting a hit and then being ready to uppercut or be in the space where she gets another less predictable offensive tool. Sometimes this means she moves backwards, sometimes this means she moves forward. Usually it's not even a normal she needs, but sometimes normals help. If she's far enough back, you get to see what you just did. Enkidu lands on something and can't guard it. If she's close enough, she can shoot at the ground, she can go for assault, cross up assault stuff, and so on. But overall, this doesn't really change much of the rest of the matchup. This is just, am I landing hits? And if I'm landing hits, can I space myself perfectly right after it? It's a good practice for our Outland player today, as it comes up a lot in other games she plays. Another good option for both players when they're close to each other is to stop their own combo short and empty jump cancel. This is because their combos were gonna end anyway, but neither of them actually has a good anti-air. At least nothing good enough that you would be able to go, okay, my opponent has jumped out of their own combo, I should hit them. The execution for the actual jump cancelling block stuff is kind of hard though, not specifically because it in itself is difficult, but the timing becomes different overall. Unfortunately, trying to assault can sometimes lead to other things happening, so you're gonna have to figure it out somewhere. Another decent option if you just want to get out of your own string without necessarily giving your opponent any quarter is just backdash out of it. It's almost as good. Because most of the time your opponent is not going to manage to chase you in time, and if they do, you're not going to take a lot of damage. But, whereas the jump is usually safe even when your health has become quite low, the backdash isn't, and you get clipped.
Oh, お仕置きの時間です。
ファーストクローズ、ディバイド。動くな。動くな。
やりますね。エテライトエア。やりますね。やりますね。動くな。動くな。
その程度。
セカンドクローズ、ディバイド。
エーテライトグラウンド。エーテライト。爪がお見通しです。寝てろ。いや、そう来ると思っていました。まだまだ。これ以上。動くな。エーテライトグラウンド。爪が甘い。根元は1000年です。
これほど。まだまだ。
動くな。潰れなさい。
お前と戦え嬉しく。
ウィナー、延期。
A new sacrifice comes to you. あなたには犠牲になってもらいます。ファーストクローズ、ディバイド。リバイド引きます。ここで偏差シック&カットやります。エージェライトグラウンド。ここで潰れなさい。
One of Ori's largest requirements in this part of this matchup is finding the right moment to use the sphere. Because obviously just standing up there and trying to spam it will get you shot. And standing at that side of the screen at all is asking to be shot. But if you get really good at assault, dashing, and her own movement, getting through basically all of Elbow's attacks becomes at least reasonable. Like, you could do this. Ori is not very easy for Elton to zone at this point. But in order to say that, you must have something else for the Elton player to focus on other than basically playing a shooting game. This is how it works in almost all games. You make the opponent think that they have to spend all of their time watching for what you're going to do, and then do something that won't matter to any of their zoning dashes that will somehow hit them or stress them out despite it. And there you see the main reason why it's important. Finding any moment to put the sphere out means more time to actually get close. This is a common theme among Omni Rabbit's characters, but not so strongly used as with Ori for various reasons. Because with Ori, you really don't have to go in. You can just do the same move twice. Whereas with most other characters in matchups, this isn't the greatest idea, though there are definitely some times in Street Fighter where this is done pretty much the same with Lara's clap. The sphere is just as easy to counter if the opponent is sure you're going to use it. But that's really not the point. Am I going to use it twice? Am I going to run at you? Am I going to jump? Am I going to go for Matt's Raid, poke you in the head with my sword? With no other intention of any other damage? Space control and positioning matter so much to Ori here that she will probably have to take the risk of using that move in a lot of situations, simply because it makes the opponent have to think more about everything. But it won't necessarily cause a win on its own. It won't cause the player to be opened up on its own, and it certainly won't get a lot of damage on its own. So you do still have to be very cognizant of both sides of the opponent's psychology. The moment where you get to do it, and probably what they were thinking at the moment where you did it. It's another one of those situations where you have to be really persistent about being okay with it taking forever for the opponent to get cornered. Fortunately, Eldam is relatively easy to corner guard compared to most characters.
原初の争いとも言える力比べで法や秩序を語るのも笑い草。けど言葉では解決しない問題は多く、まして時間に限りのあるこの夜、あなたが望むのなら腕力での解決をもって勝者を正義としましょう。
Well, now we get to have another look at more or less the same thing, but from a different player's perspective, so I'm not going to have as much to say.
ファーストクローズディバイドエーテライトグランド
まだまだまず見せるこれダンスワンドパスタやりますね。つられる動く見せる動く行きます。戦闘やっそこで足元に注意。レベロやりますね。重さまだいける動くまだまだやっエーテライトダンサー爪がやっリバインクラック爪が甘いローチダンスキこれダンサーまでやっなんで足元これ以上これリバインクラック遅いこれ立ちなさい。まだ終わってはいません。
ボディに花を咲かせました。セカンドクローズディバイドそうだ爪が
やりますこれエヴァそこで重さそこエヴァそこやりますね。重さダンサーエヴァエーテライトこれダンスワン見えますか。テイクリップファイヤー
爪が甘い
つられる動くな引きます。これダンスワン見えますか。テイクリップファイヤー負けられないお見通しです。
One of the things Elton lacks that you really start to appreciate the lack of, or rather notice the lack of, compared to other characters in this game, is that she doesn't really have any good long-range jumping normals that make you think, oh well, I'm just gonna do this and hit the opponent with the edge of this thing. Because for some reason Elton can't shoot her gun from the air. I can sort of see why that wouldn't work though. Both from a balanced perspective and a balanced perspective. She can do a lot of other things from the air, but none of them help her attack an opponent who has decided to stay on the ground and just wait for things. Meaning that she has to be in better positions than most people a lot of the time. Assault from the correct position does help, but even then she runs into the same problem. You can definitely attack, but if your range is too off or your opponent has too much more range than you, you're really just leaping into their attack range for its benefit. Normally when a character is like this, you're going for a different option altogether. Specifically, you're trying to get them to anti-air and miss because you didn't hit anything. Depending on the character's anti-air options, this might be enough, but that's not always. Aurea being one of those characters where most of the time if you try to get Aurea to whiff an anti-air, you haven't gotten that much advantage out of it. really depends on how strong the opponent's perception of your offense is. If they start to worry about it, they will anti-air more cautiously, and obviously you will have more trouble faking them out and getting any real damage from it. So you have to go one step further and do an even more fake jump, specifically a jump whose only purpose is to make them question whether or not they should be using a better anti-air. Since she has no actual attack that will land at that range though, it's hard to convince most players that they have to care. Your best option against characters like Ori is normally to use your regular jump to get forward and then assault forward after that even, to make it even more confusing. Because the opponent does not know if they should try to anti-air the first jump. Once you've convinced them not to, it's a little bit easier. The jump back version is also decent for defending yourself, but tends to be a bit more predictable because while you can absolutely delay the amount of time before you assault out of your back jump, most of the time the player in front of you doesn't care at all. Hello Lynn, we were just looking at you. Lynn is a character that stresses Wallstein out because she has so many cross-up attacks. And it actually has a decent amount of range. Certainly enough to whiff punish a bunch of Wallstein's longer buttons. Therefore, honestly, one of your better options as Wallstein is let Lynn get close to you. Trying to keep her out with other buttons often leads to bad situations for you anyway. Though often you just want to block. She might eventually open herself up anyway. And if she doesn't, then you get to watch the block strings that your opponent uses. This is kind of depressing sometimes because it means you spend a lot of time just watching your opponent beat on you. But honestly, if there was ever a character where you just go, you know what, you should just block this character for a really long time, Lynn is probably that character. Most people don't have a good option to do this because when they do get opened up eventually, things turn south really fast and they have no way to recoup the damage or get through the situation. Especially once she gets to the corner. But Wallstein doesn't care as much as most characters. Lynn mostly abuses other people because the pushback on her moves means they can't counterattack. Wallstein doesn't really have that part of the problem. As long as there's meter, something can be done. And in fact, you see the interesting result here. Then eventually stops trying to get in per se. Despite her actual options in a lot of situations, she's also relatively vulnerable to Wallstein's rushing grab because she spends a lot of her later combo time and moves that follow directly after it on the ground. She also is just generally susceptible to grabs as a character. But this isn't to say you can just use this whenever you want. Mostly the opponent has to stop attacking, though, in order to react to it, meaning you get to think, is this at the end? Are they going to go for more of this? And if they don't, then you get to do something. She's also a character that often recovers forward directly into this move when Wallstein does land a hit. So if you find you've dropped your combo, don't think about going forward, just charge for it. There you go, that's a good example of the situation you just saw. Lyn will fall back into this move if you let her. The timing of course is difficult, just like the other thing I mentioned. There's a lot of, okay, do I have the timing for this down yet? But honestly, if you don't try too hard, it can be at least not terribly stressful. Especially since getting her options started usually means that she gets into throw range like that. And her susceptibility to throws is relatively well known. To the point where, as you can just see, the player actually ran up to throw because it happens so often that, yeah, you get that whole throw tech interaction a lot. Samara's fairly familiar with this due to that same principle working on Abigail fairly often. Sometimes people just don't have enough jump to get over and still not get thrown on their landing.
俺の力見せてやる。
ファーストクローズディバイド。
いっそあれよっとオービス耐えてみせるか。いけあれよっともう一回オービタ踏み込め。ファーストセカンド逃がさねえ。覚悟オービタ飲み込みを逃がさねえ。オービタ当てろ。見えねえ。まだ見せるか。空を分かんまだだ。逃がせオービタあれよっとまだ開いてんねえか。
ウィンはい
なかなかやるわ。
セカンドクローズディバイド。
クレイバーオービタお前だ。
捕まえた。落ちてろ。叩き潰す。おっさい。それオー
ビタ負けだ。
逃がさん。あっさやだる思い込んだ。この夜でもっと
よっとオービタ
おいエリア取った叩き潰す。夜でももう上下
オービタ放て。
いい攻撃
耐えてみせる。そこだ。耐えてみせる。
理解できたか。
ウィナ
力の
ー
差を
ワレンシュタイン。サードクローズディバイド。
やるでも
飲まれて
乗せ
あれよっと
そうだ軽すぎる。
あれよっと
乗せ相手つかまだ。やるでもバカだ。
オービタオービタそこだ。逃したオービタそのまま寝てな。出ろインスレーター。
粉砕 遅い。
ファーストクローズディバイド。
どこだオービタそれ耐えてみせてオービタそれオービタ飲み込めお
風はじけろ。味方を待つ。風は味方を待つ。どうだ。打ち取れ。うわー欲しいな。
ジャンプねいけオービタ
どうした。
どこだ
ではないか。
高まれどこだ耐えて
どうして。どうだ。
耐えてみて
逃がさん。
いけ人間の力あれよ高まれ頑張れ2まだだビルブリンガーこれでよっとよっとまだだありえねえ
落ちろ。さあ立て。
ウィンバレンシュタイン。セカンドクローズディバイド。
ファーストセカンドオービタ
欲しいな。
飲まれろ飲まれろ飲まれろそこだ
One meaningful stress point for nearly all players, even considering the game that we're in, is that Hyde's relatively long reach means he can start his attacks from dash a lot earlier than you'd expect and still get good damage off it. It's not that other characters can't start some really long range attacks from dashing. It's more so that those attacks normally don't combo well enough to care. Just yes, I know you can hit me with that from there. Fine. The moves are normally meant to help them get in, whereas Hyde will get full damage off of these things. For Wall's time with relatively slow normals, this means that it's harder to deal with that simply because when Wall's time hits the button, Hyde is already in range. Neutral jumping over this can sometimes be enough, and even the forward jump tends to work out decently simply because of the type of character Wallstein is.
ウィンハイサードクローズディバイド。
People who play Street Fighter can think of it as how the boxer matchup works to some extent, and expect that these are effectively the equivalent of dash punches, quite literally. Unfortunately, on the other side, whereas Boxer will have to be punishable, or rather, not necessarily punishable, but you still have to care. If your opponent evades your dash punch, because it will be a punch, the same does not apply here. Hyde can just run at you and not hit anything, leading to that situation shifting.
A new sacrifice comes to you.
風が強いな。
あなたには犠牲になってもらいます。ファーストクローズディバイド。エバージョン。
見えた。これもまだまだよ。
って重さ先生行きます。
うこい。
耐えてみせる。油断します。足元がうるさい。重さ。天才シックアンドカット。重さ。耐えてみせる。天才正解。
螺旋。
天才シックアンドカット。好き。
なんだ。逃がすことだ。
天才シックアンドカット。 待ちなさい。まだ終わってはいません。
セカンドクローズディバイド。
まだまだよ。
偏差値グランドカット。
まだまだよ。
なんて重さ。リバインスラップ。
深く。
そこで。
まだまだ。最大攻。
負けられない。
KO。だだ。
耐えてみせる。見えますか。ブレイクニットファイヤー。耐えてみせる。リバインスラップ。これならどうです。
カルマの門。楽イントス。深く刻め。名護派遣者。
ウィナー全起動。サードクローズディバイド。
滑る。この手。見えた。
リバインスラップ。
こっちは。
リバインスラップ。株式。そうだ、いけない。
身が深く。
ブレイクダウン。
この戦いに意味はあったのでしょう。私たちのカザフ正義が絶対棚だと思い上がったことを言いはしません。原初の争いとも言える力比べで法や秩序を語るのも笑い草。けど言葉では解決しない問題は多く、まして時間に限りのあるこの夜、あなたが
その力試させてもらう。
正義の名のもとにあなたを救済します。
ファーストクローズディバイド。
おい。
リバインスラップ。
滑る。何。来い。このことはさせ。
耐えてみせる。触らないで。耐えてみせる。天節旋回。行きます。そうかな。足元天節旋回。上です。やります。行きます。
式。
スラムチェインシフト。
抜けよう。
これならどうです。リバインスラップ。
終わりだ。
やりますね。祈りを防御をやりますね。無効化する。やります。セイクリッドアロー。耐えてみせる。エバージョン。勝敗は決しました。
ウィナーオリエ。
強いな。
セカンドクローズディバイド。
まだまだよ。皆さん。まだまだ。
天節グランドパッド耐えてみせる。
終わりだ。無駄だ。
これで
ウィナ
よかった
ー
の
オリエ。
夜に集い悪しきを担う義胆の者、その死をもって誠に潔しとする。最後を見とる者としての情け。迎えが来るまでこうして共にありましょう。
風が強い。
正義の名のもとにあなたを救済します。
ファーストクローズディバイド。
これだけ
なんと
父は
おい
やりますね。
続くぞ。
エバージョンディバインクラス
まだまだよ。
父は
重い。
エバージョンやりますね。これならどうやりますね。エバージョン落ちます。やりますね。エバージョン落ちます。軽い軽い。
もっと本気を見せてみろ。
セカンドクローズディバイド。
父は
まだまだよ。
断罪。エバージョン落ちます。足元で
らせん受けよう。
レールオフ。
そこだ。まだまだ未熟。出直すよ。
ウィナー全起動。
待ち焦がれたぞ。こ
定めに従い
の時を。
光の鉄椎を
ファーストクローズディバイド。
逃がさん。
落ちます。
なんと無駄だ。まだまだやるな。
耐えてみせる。父は停戦。最後までリバインクラス耐えてみせる。リバインクラスやれ。エバージョン落ちなさい。父は行きます。足元エバージョン落ちなさい。
逃がさん。
耐えてみせる。エバージョン勝敗は決しました。
ウィナーオリエ。セカンドクローズディバイド。
逃がさん。滑る。逃がさん。まだまだ。
耐えてみせる。やりますね。
滑る。光る。
ここでエバージョン断罪。エバージョン失礼。やりますね。
その程度。
ウィナー
こうはいきません。
全起動。サードクローズディバイド。
滑る。逃がさん。見えた。
やりますね。足元でまだまだレールオフ。
これほど。
やりますね。耐えてみます。エバージョン下。エバージョン足元でエバージョンやりますね。射抜く。
逃がさん。
リバインクラス父はエバージョン落ちなさい。射抜く。そこです。弾く。防御。
逃がさん。
ブレイクダウン。
まだまだ未熟。出直すよ。
ウィナー全起動。 見せてあげましょう。年季の違いを。ファーストクローズ、ディバイド。動くな。
Another match we've already talked about on stream for today. So if you have been watching so far, you're mostly looking for all of the things mentioned, because going past that takes a lot of practice. We do tend to keep this information separately per character internally, but we haven't added much of this to our fighting game advice page yet. Mostly because if you really want to learn how to play a character and are dedicated to getting good, like sort of person who plays consistently and so on, we're probably not the best source of information on how to handle matchups. This is mostly just to get you through and help you understand what is going wrong and maybe help you realize, hey, this tool works here, so that you can come up with your own style of doing so. If you want to know what we are actually able to help with, you can check out tuning-mk.org/bots. In this game's case, I believe the bots are still under UNIST bots. We will probably make a redirect so it'll be unclear. It goes to the same thing, but it's not necessarily going to happen soon because most of the time we haven't done all of the tests yet. You can let us know, of course, if the behavior of the bots has somehow drastically changed. But since some of this can be dependent on how you input it and little things, you probably have to be fairly familiar with the character in the first place to know what would have changed based on the inputs we had between one game and another, or one version and another. So you're probably not going to get too many updates on this matter soon. Similar to how we are still kinda in our slower 2-month hiatus. It's odd that we even ended up playing this, but we did definitely want to. We were pulled back from playing this game recently too often. Not to mention poor Guilty Gear Zard, which hasn't seen us in probably months. Sad given that Tuesday Train specifically started as Guilty Gear, but as it stands now, you always got to prioritize certain things, and you can always learn something about the game just by hanging around and watching certain other people stream. Everyone does learn differently, of course, so making sure that you have a clear idea of how you interact with the game itself, other streamers, and so on can definitely help. That's the sort of thing we might eventually start putting into fighting game advice page on our website, but for now, assume we're still more or less on break until mid-August Eve, which is normally when we would have started preparing for East Coast Throwdown, or anything along those timelines. Presumably this year, the world's terrible pandemic status is going to prevent that from happening. That I think we've already got confirmation that East Coast Throwdown 2020 is not a thing. Sad given that last year was so nice, but you gotta stay safe. Now here's a bona fide straight up hard matchup.
見せてあげましょう。年季の違いを。
Eltnam mostly spends her time not so much running away from Lin, but trying to run around Lin. And running around a character is much harder than running away from them. This is where understanding the exact height at which you should be able to hit Assault helps out, and the fact that Assault can be triggered in the same way if you forward jump as an instant air dash really helps. Because your opponent is going to spend a lot of time trying to pin you down and get close enough to land and attack your feet. But you also can't necessarily just jump every time you see them coming. And if you do jump, you have to be ready for whatever response they have. But this still has a good side for Eltnam. It means that she doesn't get to use a lot of her specials or normals though. She spends a lot of time in this match really specifically seeing how good the player is at dodging. The better you are at dodging, the harder Lin's job becomes, and the more likely you are to get any damage at all really. This is primarily because Lin's approaches that do good damage are all susceptible to being grabbed on the feet. If you watch carefully, you'll even see those moments where the Lin player is trying to react to things by doing this, or get a knockdown long enough to make sure that she can reach Eltnam before that move can be launched. But on the other side of that, we get the same thing. If Lin is spending that much time on that, then Eltnam gets to leave the ground on purpose. Or, you know, just shoot in front of her, depending. But you have to master dodging to understand this matchup. Not to play it, eventually you don't really have to dodge Lin that much. You have a lot of good spacing, perfect understanding of what other players want to do, and so on. But in order to prevent yourself from being terribly stressed out by this character, you have to dodge. Fortunately, Eltnam has an actual dodge to help with this, but it's still not going to be enough for a lot of things Lin wants to do. This is difficult for Tanzaki Dynasty because she has a strong tendency to confront her opponent and try to stand her ground, rather than dodge them. But she can definitely get it into her head that the dodging must happen. It's usually her issue that she doesn't dodge twice. Most people will dodge because they feel as if it's going to give them an opening to do their own thing. But against Lin in particular, this applies to most of the characters in this game, honestly. Fighting against Lin, you have to dodge her twice more often than not because she has the first move and then a follow-up that will chase something else you did, meaning you don't get to do anything there. Getting her off you once she's gotten in is just as much stress, but at least Eltnam can quickly get to the other side if the Lin player isn't mentally heavily prepared for that. So she's harder to corner. Fortunately, at least in this case, this player seems to be close by enough that there should be very little if any lag. Certainly not the primary reason why this becomes a problem. Then knowing where in the string to counter also makes Eltnam's job really hard, as she has a lot of gaps in her stuff that you normally respect because you don't necessarily have the right spacing, but this is often a thing that comes up in games with parry characters. Their lack of counter-attacking move can be a problem, but if you just parry out of it, who cares?
邪魔をするなら
お仕置きの
片付けるまでだ。
ファーストクローズディバイド
逃がさねえ、逃がさねえ。あれよっと
敵までなんとそうだやりますね戦闘ネメロ
強い。
潰れなさいそこですやりますね元は1000点ですそこです
おまけだ。
引き寄せる
飲み込め。
やりますね
Now we're back with that discussion of the strengths of Hyde. I get to hit buttons from much further away than you'd expect me to be able to. But just as in Street Fighter, Elton has some good options based on neutral jumping. Unlike most characters, Hyde does tend to come forward enough that the neutral jump is helpful. This is particularly true because it causes Hyde to end up behind her, and therefore she doesn't end up cornered. By avoiding being cornered, she can also backdash out of certain situations instead, and not have to worry about it. Which gives her enough space to just shoot it. One difficulty of understanding how to use the neutral jump in this game that doesn't come up in most others is the fact that Assault's arc and how you use it based on neutral jumps is a little different than just air dashing. Air dashing tends to lead to a relatively straightforward, literally, attack that often lets you use your long buttons. Your opponent must react to it in a spacing and timing that really can stress you out. In this game, Assault tends to be a little more telegraphed. It's literally just jumping but from the air. And this means you're more likely to be anti-aired if the opponent was even lightly expecting it. Leading to the situation being similar to Orier. You generally want to take advantage of the fact that Hyde probably doesn't want to go full on the uppercut style anti-air because you would be tricking and managing to cause a miss. And therefore you just fake out and don't go all in on it. You do the assault either earlier or later, or don't do it at all. We are now definitely pushing toward the end of the stream though. The lounge may stay open a while. It's difficult to say because in this case we're full up, everyone seems to be at least having fun, so we might just leave it and let it rock, but I'm expecting to see some people start passing out of the lounge one way or another, and not everyone will always be taking their turn. I expect for now, for example, that we're going to see a skip here, which is fine, but it does lead into us probably closing up the stream soon after this, and at least not having anything more to say. So now we might get a face-off of the wolves, depending on how aware either of them was of the situation. Yes, here we go. These two are decently good at understanding the flow of the other, but Enkidu has the slight edge here. They both have the same type of rushing moves, and Gordo can definitely cover a lot of space, but being able to just flatly counter nearly every time this happens just requires enough guts. In short, if you were willing to go in and get hit by Gordo stuff, then you might as well have countered. A lot of the time this is true. And it's something to remember as a general lesson for fighting games, that if you really thought that it was a good idea to try to attack your opponent who had good zoning moves, then you might as well have waited to do the counter zone or tried your parry or something, especially if it was a relatively strong move in itself. The reason this is helpful is because it discourages the opponent from just blindly doing the move. They will get countered, and then they have to worry about getting countered, and not just about whether or not they can do it in time. This does not mean that you're not going to sometimes mistime it, get hit, with your parry, counter at air, get hit. But it's not really about that, it's about getting your opponent to slow down enough that when you try to get in close, they don't immediately just swing their big button at you. Characters like this often have to pay a certain amount of health. It's difficult for them to get a perfect on a really zony opponent because they have to take enough risks. But that part of this is often built into fighting games. The idea that you will have to take certain risks and certain characters get more health so that they can do that. Enkidu isn't so much a high health character for that reason, but he does have a lot of good options for it, and most of the time Gordo doesn't convert all of that well, even after managing to do the quote-unquote with punish of the parry. You can use this to just feel more comfortable as a player. Just get used to the fact that you sometimes get hit when you parry. But take the feelings of satisfaction when you do parry. Because if nothing else, it will at least stress certain opponents out. They have to then take their own time to get used to the feeling of, okay, well, I should probably keep on hitting the button to keep them out even though they're carrying me. Because it's usually better than letting them jump, or letting them rush, or whatever else I am worried about. One thing you're already seeing used here by Wolf is actually the double dash, which is really helpful. Specifically, when you have dash on an opponent who was expecting this once and block, they're not often expecting you to dash again, especially if you condition them to think, well, I might parry you now that you should be trying to do this. The reason this helps so much is because the distance is now much shorter and they have much less time for the reaction. And you can just kind of ignore if they actually happen to backdash, just let them backdash. In fact, trying to catch up with a player like that because they backdashed out of it is usually the quick way to lose. When you see your opponent backdash, think of something else to do. They're going to get themselves to the corner eventually. And once they've gotten to the corner, you usually have much better options. And then you can worry about just execution. You don't have to worry about getting in, you don't have to worry about much else. We look at their meter sometimes. Oh, okay, well, that might be a threat, or it might not. But at the end of the day, your overall flow gets to change once you get this type of character to the corner because their advantages somewhat dissipate. Gordo is not a full zoner, so he does have some good options at close range that don't really just fall short. But against Enkidu in particular, they're not necessarily great. Not because Enkidu can necessarily counter them, but more so that they tend to be just within Enkidu's counter-attack range. And those counter-attacks are usually not small. So there's always that to worry about. Add up to all that the fact that when they trade, it's almost always in Enkidu's favor, heavily. And Gordo finds himself in quite a bit of problems.
Winner. 遠軌道
But that's all we have time for tonight. Join us on Thursday for 60 times our Dead or Alive 6 Battle Lounge, where we'll be probably talking about mostly the same things, honestly. Because the players aren't going to change and their character styles aren't going to change either. So, this has been Rillian for Team 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.